12:30 and we are in weather impact alert mode, tracking the potential for severe weather this afternoon. And we're under a weather impact alert, but we're also awaiting what's going to happen with the Storm Prediction Center and the National Weather Service. We are awaiting some sort of watch to come out for our area. It will probably be a tornado watch for parts of Metro Atlanta, points east and points south. That will include Henry County, who just had one now confirmed EF2 tornado that touched down yesterday. And it's this next line of storms moving in that we're really hyper focused on for this afternoon. So the weather impact alert runs until 4 o'clock today. Strong thunderstorms, some severe thunderstorms possible. So staying alert. I know it's summer. Kids are outside. You want to get out on the lake. Kids have summer camps and stuff. We want to make sure you have a way to get warnings this afternoon and stay indoors as the storms are coming in, because they will intensify the further south and east that we go, even though they don't look that intense now. We don't have the watch quite yet, but I've got this graphic pulled up just to catch it right as it comes out this afternoon. But here is the broken line of downpours, of thunderstorms. They're in our northwestern suburbs up through the North Georgia mountains. One little cell by itself has been increasing in its lightning count up into Cobb County right now. So that's right over the south side of Kennesaw, heading out towards Kennesaw Mountain, in towards the 120 loop, the west part of Marietta near Fair Oaks, and that's going to be pushing southeastward. So eventually in down that I-75 corridor, out towards Truist Park and the Cumberland Parkway and Cumberland Interchange there, the Cobb Cloverleaf. We've also got some more downpours in northern Carroll County near Villa Rica. Another little downpour there near the tri-point, the intersection of those three counties between northeastern Fulton County, Forsyth County, and Gwinnett County. That doesn't have any lightning on it right now, but that heavy rain heading right over Buford into the 985 and 85 split. Zooming in a little bit closer, this is right over. Here's a kind of the 120 loop right here. This is Dobbins Air Force Base, so it's traveling southeast in that direction and passing over West Cobb. And then let's go up and talk about the rest of that broken line. It starts off in northeast Georgia. We don't have a lot of lightning strikes here, but the rain is intense in Helen. It's intense in Clayton up in Rabun County. And then we also see a few pockets of rain that gets a little bit heavier down into Lumpkin County near Dahlonega. Here's a thunderstorm right over Jasper. And we are also looking at a little bit of heavy rain in northern Dawson County that's moving in towards Dawsonville, and then we'll go further south and west along the line. Bartow County, Cartersville, that heavy rain moving over Lake Allatoona, and that'll be pushing southeastward in towards Woodstock here shortly. Additional heavy rain right now over Polk County near Cedartown. No lightning on that. I know these don't look that impressive on radar at the moment, but as they get further south and east, we expect them to intensify. And that's because, look at this, there's sunshine over here in central and southern Georgia, and because we don't have the rain here quite yet, the temperatures are a little bit warmer south and east of that line of showers and thunderstorms. So you'll notice on our threats graphic for today, the greatest risk of severe weather is across central and southeastern Georgia rather than northwest Georgia. That's because we get more of that daytime heating in before the storms arrive, and that destabilizes the atmosphere. So level 2 risk of severe weather for the areas the storms are entering in now, and for the rest of our viewing area for southeast Georgia, Augusta down to Statesboro, down to Savannah. They're under a level 3 risk of severe weather today. So watching the storms to get stronger the further south and east that we go. And this graphic is going to kind of paint that similar picture. This is our severe weather risks graphic, which breaks down what are the different components of severe weather that we could be seeing. You can see our tornado threat. This is, we call this a 2% chance of a tornado within a 25-mile radius. So it is a low chance, very low chance, but not zero. The hail threat also low on the scale, but not zero. But what we feel is more of a widespread threat for today will be those damaging winds. Some of those winds could be 50 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour. And remember, it has been a really wet May, an incredibly wet May. And I put the numbers here for you. Through last night, we've had almost 7 inches of rainfall. Our normal to date for the month of May is under 3.5. So we've actually had more than double the rainfall that we should receive in the month of May. And with the ground being so saturated like a soaked sponge, the root systems of trees give way a lot easier when we have these gusts of wind. We saw that during Helene. The grass was so saturated, we had more wind damage on the eastern side of town, even though the winds weren't that strong as they were out in places like Augusta. So I am watching this afternoon as we head through the next 3 to 4 hours, that potential for some downed trees by the root system because of how soggy the ground is right now. We've got a lot of clouds at our camera overlooking Atlanta. It's 76 degrees right now. A little bit warmer to the south and east, 77 Covington, Thomaston 77. Couple spots may pop to 80 degrees before those storms move in. We're cooler up in northwest Georgia, and I do expect the temperatures south and east of Atlanta to be our hot spots of the day for the rest of the afternoon. Here's forecast track. This is one model. This is not what every model looks like. This is the HER model. So it's actually bringing some of those pop-up showers and storms a little bit further south and east, which we were kind of seeing on radar. It's bringing a couple of little showers here. So it brings more activity over the next hour across the metro. And then you see as we advance things out to 1, 2 o'clock, really targeting Atlanta and our south and eastern suburbs. And as we get closer to 3, 4 o'clock this afternoon, we're clear at that point in Atlanta. 3 o'clock, still some of those heavy thunderstorms passing through Covington, passing through Butts County, and even maybe a little bit in southeastern Henry County. And then as we get towards 4 or 5 o'clock today, they should be just about out of here. And behind these showers and thunderstorms, we're going to see the skies clearing tonight. And I know it's been a relentless pattern with the last few weeks of a round of storms after round of storms after round of storms. We do expect dry weather and much more comfortable conditions. Most of us will see that the whole weekend, but there is a slight chance of rain by Sunday. So rain chance in Atlanta at its highest over the next 2 hours or so. As we get past 3 o'clock this afternoon, those storms are moving through our southeastern counties. And then you'll notice by 8 o'clock tonight, we're going to be clearing out and bringing in some clearer skies just in time for sunset. Now, also going on today, ahead of those storms, is the damage survey in Henry County in Locust Grove. And I mean, the damage is just, it's really significant. It's not a large area of significant damage, but where the storm, the tornado was at its strongest, it really, that wind got into a couple of houses and just caused some structural failure in some of these houses. So the National Weather Service has been out surveying the damage, and Keith Stellman, the meteorologist in charge at Peachtree City, he said that this correlates to mid to high end EF2 for the rating of that tornado. So mid to high end EF2 is between 120 and 135 miles per hour. That would actually make it the strongest tornado that we've seen so far this year in all of North Georgia. So we don't know the path of that storm. First, what they do when they go in a damage survey is they go to where the damage is worse, and they have all of this structural engineering involved in creating the scale of what was the wind rating on this tornado. They want to look at how this structure that collapsed or failed was secured with the walls to the foundation of the house, and how was the roof secured to the foundation before the storm came in, and then based on the damage they see, what kind of wind would have caused that damage. So that's the enhanced Fujita scale. So we know that it was strongest very close to Bethlehem Road. There were a couple of neighborhoods in here just west of the interstate where the damage was most significant. So that actually makes for Henry County's 4th tornado so far of this year. And this tornado that touched down yesterday in Henry County happened just about a mile away from where they had a tornado back on April 7th. So it has been a rough couple of weeks. It's been a rough couple of months, and that was actually our 14th tornado in our viewing area so far this year, and that is more than all the other months combined, and then some. We've had 10 tornadoes the other months of the year. For the month of May, we've had 14 tornadoes. So today, hyper-focused on showers and storms moving in. With that, potential tornado watch coming out. I was looking at my phone a second ago because we coordinate with the National Weather Service in a little chat room, and what they were saying is it's probably going to be a tornado watch. It's likely not going to be a severe thunderstorm watch because they're watching out for that little bit of rotation as the storms get further south and east. But also this storm in Dawson and Pickens County that I was showing you, they're saying that could now have some gusty winds to about 40 miles per hour. I'll take the radar up in that direction. That's this one right here. Eastern Pickens County near Jasper, and also northern Dawson County. This is pushing right over State Georgia Highway 53 into Dawsonville. Going to be moving southeast into Ball Ground in northern Cherokee County as well. The emergency manager in Jasper said they had only a gust of about 25 miles per hour, but there's signs with more lightning that the storm could actually be increasing in its intensity. Also, Justin, the outlook for today has been updated again. So they issue outlooks pretty frequently. I just wanted to glance at it. It looked like it hasn't changed any on our end. It looks like it is the same with that level 2 over us. So again, recapping the forecast today. Tracking thunderstorms. I just want to show you the weekend forecast though, because it's been pretty relentless over the last 4 weeks trying to get in some of those outdoor activities. It looks much better Saturday. Sunday, a few showers are possible to the north. Let me just show you that forecast track. Looks okay Saturday. Sunday will start off in the morning dry, but it's in the late afternoon and evening. Couple of showers and storms will slide into northeast Georgia from Tennessee. We'll watch those, but hopefully most of those will not be in the Atlanta area. So that would be later in the day, but otherwise most of your weekend is looking okay. So in the meantime, we're waiting that watch to come out. We're under a weather impact alert. Our next live extended update coming up at the top of the hour, right at 1 o'clock. And if we do get that severe thunderstorm watch out before then, we'll hop on here as well and let you know about that. That's the latest here. I'm meteorologist Melissa Nora. We'll see you back here in about 20 minutes.
When storms roll in, safety is everything. For Philip and Amy Baker, having their own storm shelter at home has been a game changer.
It makes me feel a lot safer because before they'd have to go across the next door to get their basement. And a lot of times they're running when it's raining, they're running when there's lightning falling, heavy wind. And a lot of those times it's been my wife and my daughter having to take 2 grandkids and a dog, and it can be a lot.
Philip, a firefighter, says peace of mind is priceless, especially when he's away at the station and the storms hit home.
I am one of the thousands of people that have weather anxiety. And so when that warning comes out, we just grab everybody. It's chaotic. I mean, it's crazy. You know, kids might be crying because they're tired or they're hungry. I have an autistic son, so he might be throwing a fit, and having a meltdown. And our dog, he might be, wanting to go to the bathroom at the, time we're trying to get in there. It's crazy. But we'll grab everybody and we'll get in there and we'll shut that thing, and we are just ready for anything at that point.
Pike County isn't new to tornadoes. Since 1950, it's had at least 10 of them. Most were on the weaker side, a couple of EF0s, a few EF1s, but 2 of them reached EF3 strength. In 2023, everything changed. On January 12th, a major outbreak swept across north and central Georgia, spawning 14 tornadoes, some long track and powerful. Pike County alone saw at least 4 separate tornadoes that day. Survey teams for the National Weather Service found something rare: multiple tornadoes on the ground at the same time, even crossing paths. One touched down near Highway 362 and quickly ramped up to an EF1, snapping trees and cutting across roads. Then it intensified to an EF2 as it moved toward Nunnally and Bethany roads, damaging homes and leaving a path of destruction behind. Altogether, 18 people were hurt, and for many, the fear and anxiety still lingers. Just as the Bakers, their storm shelter is stocked with snacks, toys, and even lavender diffusers to help keep everyone calm when the skies turn dark.
So because we have small grandchildren, I have this back wall here just with magnets and puzzles. I've got coloring books and crayons. I've got their writing tablets and just different things to keep them occupied, because if they're happy, then I'm less stressed.
The shelter is FEMA rated and bolted right into their garage slab, built to withstand winds over 200 miles per hour. The company that built the shelter even tested it during an EF5 tornado.
There's 11 10-inch bolts that go into the concrete slab to make it that safe.
But not everyone has access to a personal storm shelter. Meteorologist and storm shelter advocate Dr. Craig Cece says that's a growing concern, especially in places like North Georgia where shelters are rare.
North Georgia does get significant tornado events from time to time. It's more challenging to deal with very large metropolitan area to make a tornado shelter plan, but there is definitely the demand.
Dr. Craig Cece created FindYourTornadoShelter.com, mapping shelters across the country to help families find safe places fast.
You want to make sure you make your plan well ahead of time, because a car is never a safe place during a tornado. So you want to make sure you are there well before the tornado hits, wherever you're going to be, whether it be in your home in the interior room, if you're lucky enough to have a basement, or if you go to a public building.
So far this year, we've had a higher than normal amount of tornado warnings. This graphic shows all of the warnings issued between January 1st and late May. And you can see there is an overlay of warnings just south of the metro area, as well as in northwest Georgia. Several polygons cover the same counties over and over again. Pike County has only had 2 tornado warnings since the 2023 outbreak, and they were both this year. For the Bakers, this shelter has already proven its worth, especially during a rogue tornado warning for their county in April, which was 2 days before we spoke to the family and just north of their home.
And that was probably one of the scariest times, because we didn't know where it was. We didn't have a chance to watch beforehand. And so we ran in here at the last second. It could have been in our backyard, and we had seconds. And when we got in here, you could hear the wind and all, and the garage was moving. But I felt safe. I knew we were okay, because this can withstand an EF5 if we ever had one of those.
Storm shelters may not take away the fear, but they can offer something even more powerful: safety.
just issued the severe thunderstorm watch. Good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Nicole Hartford. A severe thunderstorm watch just issued across North Georgia for many counties through Metro Atlanta. This includes from Cherokee County up towards portions of Gwinnett, as well as Forsyth, and then down towards the south and the east as we track this line of storms making its way across North Georgia. This thunderstorm watch is going to be in effect until 8 o'clock this evening, but it's likely that storms will be cleared of the area long before then, at least here in Metro Atlanta and North Georgia. In fact, our main timeline associated with these storms is really through 4, maybe 5 o'clock this afternoon. So it's very likely that the National Weather Service ends up pulling some of these counties early from that severe thunderstorm watch. So I want you to really pay attention according to these storms until about 4 or 5 o'clock this evening. That's when our storm threat is the highest. So we do have that weather impact alert with some strong thunderstorms possible. You need to be sure that you're able to get those alerts as they come out from our 11Alive app or some way on your phone. You can get any severe thunderstorm warnings that are issued. If you are within a severe thunderstorm warned area, you need to make sure to be indoors as those storms come through. Our main storm threats associated with this are going to be for gusty winds as well as heavy rainfall and frequent lightning. So those are the things we're watching the closest. We've got that moderate risk for heavy rainfall and strong winds. It's very likely that some of the winds associated with these storms get up to that severe threshold of 50, 60 miles per hour. And I want to note as well that because the ground is so saturated, because we've seen so much rainfall over the course of the last week in North Georgia, it's very likely that it doesn't even take wind speeds that strong to bring down some trees. So be very cautious when it comes to driving around the next couple of hours, as there could be tree limbs on the roadways as these storms come through and in the aftermath of these storms later this afternoon. Our risks that are lower, but still something we need to watch, are for hail as well as a tornado threat. So that tornado risk is low, but an isolated spin-up tornado certainly can't be ruled out. There's that line of storms right now. It's looking a little bit more impressive on radar. It's producing some heavier rainfall, some lightning, but still not quite up to the strength that we're anticipating as it moves down towards the south and east. A lot of that has to do with temperatures and the current conditions across Metro Atlanta and down towards the south. Up until this point, as these storms moved through northwest Georgia, temperatures were a little cooler. There wasn't as much sunshine, so the atmosphere is just inherently more stable. As these have shifted down towards the south, they have already started to strengthen. So we're tracking a number of locations where there is already some heavy rainfall and a couple lightning strikes up into far north Fulton County. This line of storms really extends all the way down from Troup County, Meriwether County, out into Randolph County, Alabama, where there's a decent amount of lightning there, all the way up just north of the 85 corridor through portions of Gwinnett County, up into Forsyth County, and then into the northeastern corner of the state. Some of the heaviest pockets of rainfall right now surrounding Metro Atlanta are on the north side of the city and the west side of the city. So out towards Smyrna and Vinings, we're seeing some heavy rainfall, out towards Sandy Springs as well, and then into portions of far northern DeKalb County as well as Gwinnett County, with that heavy rain extending towards Lawrenceville. Notice not a lot of lightning in this particular kind of stretch of these storms, but some heavier rainfall and certainly signs that these showers and storms are intensifying. We've also got some heavy rainfall up into portions
portions of Dawson County with that heavy rain currently stretching through Dawson, through the Dawsonville area, and then out towards the east, a couple strikes of lightning there, and then down towards portions of Polk County, as well as into Bartow County. That's where we have a lot of heavy rainfall at this point in time. Honestly, the strongest little isolated embedded storm that we're currently watching, at least the one that's producing the most lightning, is off into Randolph County, Alabama, and this stretches into Troup County as well as up into Heard County. So this is moving off towards the southeast. These storms are moving pretty quickly. They are again producing heavy rainfall associated with this incoming cold front. So as this line of storms rolls through, we will be tracking for that possibility of some heavier rainfall and lightning, which we're already seeing, as well as some gustier winds. Some of these storms previously have already produced wind gusts up to about 30-40 miles per hour, which is enough to blow around some tree limbs, but none so far have been up to severe criteria. This cold front, once it moves through, is essentially going to put an end to our rainfall potential and bring in some drier air. So we've got this round of rainfall to get through before we start to enjoy some drier conditions just in time for the weekend. Now, with these storms moving through northwestern corner of the state, you're pretty much in the clear when it comes to that risk of rainfall and certainly severe weather. We have a couple isolated showers still extending up towards the north of the main line, but overall conditions a lot drier behind this main line of showers and storms. So this will continue moving southeast, exiting our area by about 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon, and then we will be all in the clear when it comes to that risk for severe weather. The highest severe weather threat is down towards the southeast of us, and it has a lot to do with what I said before about warmth and sunshine. There's a lot warmer air down towards the south of us and off towards the east into portions of South Carolina and North Carolina, as well as through the Augusta area where that level 3 risk for severe weather is. So these storms are expected to continue the trajectory that they've already been on of intensifying as they move down towards the southeast. All of our area is in that level 1 to level 2 risk. They did just trim it back about an hour ago to take the far northwestern corner of the state out of that level 1 threat. And as we continue to get these updates, they'll likely continue to kind of trim this further down towards the southeast as that risk for severe weather subsides behind the main line of storms. Here's what it looks like currently at Truist Park. It is absolutely pouring. We've got a torrential rainfall right now out at the Battery. You can see the heavy rainfalls really limiting visibility as well. So even though these storms are not severe warned, even though they're not producing insanely gusty winds just yet, they are still hazardous if you are out on the roadways, so make sure to take it slow. These periods of heavy rainfall shouldn't last for too long, so our overall severe weather or overall flood risk associated with this is going to be on the lower end, but we could still see some pooling on roadways. And again, the ground is very saturated, so it won't take much to really watch as some of that pools up on roads where the heavier rainfall exists. Here's how it plays out hour by hour on your forecast track. So the broken line of storms continues to become a little more widespread, a little more distinct. Notice it is not all looking strong to severe. On our forecast track, we have areas where there are some darker reds, some pinks indicated on the forecast track, and that's where we anticipate some of the heavier rainfall. So it's not going to be widespread severe thunderstorm strength winds, but there will be areas embedded within these storms where we have that possibility of stronger winds, and we'll also be watching for that low end risk of a tornado, of some rotation kind of embedded within some of those storms. That line will continue pushing down towards the southeast. So by 2 o'clock, really within the next hour or so, this is closing in on Metro Atlanta. In fact, we probably have another 20-30 minutes before we start to see the heavy rainfall across a good portion of downtown Atlanta. This will continue pushing down towards the southeast into the afternoon hours. Still seeing the pockets of the heavier rainfall, indications of the stronger storms. Notice behind that line, though, a couple isolated showers, but overall not a lot of activity. So once that main line of storms moves through your area, it's quieter for the night. You can kind of let your guard down when it comes to that severe weather threat. And I think most of this, if not all of this, is out of our far southern counties by 4 or 5 o'clock this evening. This is our HER forecast model. It has introduced this little isolated storm behind that main line, but again, more stable air, cooler air will start to move in pretty quickly behind this line of storms, and that should really limit not only the risk for rainfall, but also our threat for severe weather as we get into later this afternoon and evening and things start to settle down. On our forecast track, we continue drying out and clearing out into the afternoon and the evening. It has been an active week across North Georgia. We've had a number of days, Sunday night, Tuesday night, and yesterday, where we had confirmed tornadoes across the 11Alive viewing area. This is the most recent confirmed tornado from yesterday. It took place at 3:30 yesterday evening in Henry County near Locust Grove. We've only gotten preliminary reports so far from the National Weather Service, but they were out this morning surveying the damage from that tornado and have said that it is likely a mid to high end EF2, which would put its wind speeds at about the 120 to 135 mile per hour range. We will likely get the final report from this tornado either later today or tomorrow, depending on how the storms throughout the rest of this afternoon play out. And this tornado left destruction across portions of the Locust Grove area. Not widespread damage, but the damage that it did have was very significant, especially for this home near Locust Grove that essentially was flattened and did send that 18-year-old flying out of the house and into the hospital. This damage was the worst of it. So we saw damage as far as trees down and that kind of thing surrounding the Locust Grove area, but in this neighborhood, that was certainly where the damage was most extreme. You are also taking a look now in the corner of your screen at our 11Alive weather impact tracker that will be out. It's following those storms. I believe it's on I-75. Pretty impressive cloud structure there ahead of it as well. So we'll be out tracking these storms as they come through, and we'll have those live views for you as well. Now, these storms that are currently moving through, as I said, out of here by 4 or 5 o'clock later this evening. So just a couple hours before we enter into what will be a somewhat prolonged quieter pattern to an extent. Now, this weekend, if you're thinking ahead to those weekend plans, looks great. So once these storms move through tonight, conditions are taking a turn for Saturday and Sunday, and it will be great to get outdoors, especially Saturday. It looks absolutely beautiful. Lower humidity, cool morning, comfortable afternoon. We do bring in a few showers as well as some cloud cover by Sunday, but because of our lower humidity, it should really limit too much in the way of rainfall. Our dew points, it's a measure of your humidity, will drop down into the comfortable range as we get into tonight and tomorrow morning, and they'll stay a little bit more comfortable into the weekend as well as this upcoming week. Couple isolated showers will be possible by Sunday. Here's how your forecast track plays out through the weekend. We're talking some sunshine throughout the day on Saturday. Beautiful conditions all day, nice and warm in the afternoon. By Sunday morning, some cloud cover starts to build in. We'll watch as a few isolated showers develop, mainly up into far North Georgia. These could come with some periods of heavy rainfall, a couple rumbles of thunder, but at this point, we're not too concerned about a severe weather threat. So this kicks off a drier period throughout North Georgia. And while we do have rain chances that re-enter the forecast, especially into Thursday and Friday of next week, we should get a nice stretch where we're not too concerned about a risk for severe weather. We do still have that weather impact alert in place through 4 o'clock this evening. Again, that severe thunderstorm watch that was just issued remains in effect until 8 o'clock this evening, but includes counties down towards the south. So it's very likely the National Weather Service will take us out of that warning or out of that watch early as these storms move through the area. We'll continue to have updates here on Weather Impact 24/7 every half hour. So our next update will be in just about 20 minutes at 1:30, and we'll continue to track these storms.
under the weather. The 11Alive weather impact alert. We have to brace for more storms coming our way. It could be some damaging winds, also some heavy rain, frequent lightning. All that could be coming our way today. Take a look at this. Thursday's weather producing a tornado in Henry County. You can see it spinning across I-75 yesterday, passing right in front of those cars right there. Heading into yesterday, the National Weather Service had recorded 13 tornadoes during the month of May. That's more than what has been recorded for the first 4 months of the year combined. 11Alive's Ariana Moniz is on the ground this morning in Henry County, where a tornado touched down in one neighborhood where she is out there in Locust Grove. And Ariana, you saying that it damaged some homes, even leveled one, right?
Yeah, that's right, Chesley. That tornado hit this Locust Grove neighborhood with little to no warning to neighbors in this area. And it moved through a portion of this neighborhood, leveling, what's interesting, only one home. Take a look. This is the aftermath of that tornado. That one home leveled. 2 people were inside. One of them, an 18-year-old, he was thrown from the second story in critical condition this morning. This tornado touched around 3:30 p.m., tearing through the Laurel Creek neighborhood. We spoke to Henry County officials. They say at least 13 structures damaged, destroying 2. And that one home hit so hard, 18-year-old Malachi thrown at least a football field away from his home in the wooded area right behind the home. And we spoke to his father, Trey Cheney, overnight. He is an actor from the show The Wire. He was also hurt. He was released from the hospital. His father says that Malachi was unconscious when neighbors found him, but is now fighting hard for his life in ICU. He says his son Malachi is still in critical condition with broken ribs and a fractured facial bone. Trey posted a very emotional video on social media saying that he wished he could be in his son's place right now. Take a listen.
I'm doing a video to let y'all know right now, man, cherish life as much as you can. Like, we was just, me and my son had a beautiful day today. Big ticket show. We was with Snoop from The Wire. We was chilling. And 3 o'clock today, in a split second, my house is gone. I just got out the hospital. I got this bruise on my head. I wish I could replace the pain with my son. No, I wish he was the one that was doing the video and I was still in ICU.
And Chesley, as a parent, you can only imagine that that's a parent's worst nightmare, but it is also a story of survival. And Trey, he recorded that video after he found his phone. He says he crawled through the rubble of his leveled home, finding his cell phone to record that video. And Chesley, we know the National Weather Service will be in this neighborhood surveying what's left in the aftermath of that tornado. Chesley? Absolutely.
When you look around that neighborhood right there, obviously a tornado has struck down, especially over his home. Do you see any other homes damaged like that, or was it just his house?
Well, Chesley, from what we can see, his home was the only one leveled by that tornado. A few homes nearby, you see some of the siding coming off some of the homes, a few roofs partially damaged, but his home is pretty much the only one that is badly damaged by that tornado, pretty much destroyed. You see a few pieces of tree limbs in a few of the neighbors' homes' front yards, but that's pretty much it. We also saw the Office of Insurance Commissioners going through the neighborhood, letting neighbors know you just really want to be careful when you are contacted by contractors when you're in the process of repairing your home at this point, Chesley.
All right, sounds right. Thanks a lot, Ariana. I really appreciate that report. Stay safe out there.
see severe storms moving in, we are committed to issue an 11Alive weather impact alert to let you know as we are approaching the day when any storms could develop. We want to alert you to make you be aware so that you can prepare for any storms moving in. One of the ways and one of the tools that we use within a weather impact alert is letting you know when it would come in, what type of impacts we would see, and what you need to do to keep you and your family safe. This is just one example where we might say the storms are more likely to occur between 2 and 6 o'clock on any particular afternoon. The main threat or impact would be the storms that will be developing that could have thunder and lightning with them, maybe even strong winds or tornadoes. And we also want to make sure that we tell you what you need to do to keep your family safe. In this situation, we would want you to identify a safe place where we may have strong winds that could bring down some trees. So every storm has those different ingredients and also the different impacts that we would want to point out to you every time. You often see us using what we call convective outlooks, and these are issued by the Storm Prediction Center. And we often show these maps with the different colors, showing the slight risk, the moderate risk for severe storms, or the enhanced risk for severe storms. So this is what those colors mean and a breakdown of what we're looking at. That level 1 of 5 risk, the green color, would be a marginal risk, meaning that any storms would be isolated or short-lived. You would see winds 40 to 60 miles an hour, hail up to 1 inch in diameter, and they would be a low tornado risk, usually with a level 1 risk. It goes up to a level 2 risk when we have, it's called the slight risk, and that means instead of isolated storms, they may be a little more scattered or a little more numerous in the area. Any storms would be short-lived, but it is possible that we could have some tornadoes with that and also some strong winds or wind damage associated with it too. A level 3 risk is called the enhanced risk, and that's when we could have numerous severe storms moving through. They could be a little more persistent and long-lived, and we could have a few tornadoes with those and numerous reports of wind damage in association with that too. It gets a little more intense when we're talking about a level 4 or a level 5 risk. A level 4 risk is considered a moderate risk. You would have widespread severe storms. They would be long-lived. We could have strong tornadoes with that. That causes widespread wind damage, and you could also have some large hail in association with that. The highest risk...
It is 1:30 and we are tracking strong thunderstorms moving over Atlanta. This is a live camera from the airport and you can hardly see in the distance in this camera. It's changed a lot in a matter of 5 minutes even. We have a plane right there trying to take off in the middle of this thunderstorm. There is currently a ground stop for incoming flights from other airports until 2:30 this afternoon. So ground stop at the airport for incoming flights. But at the moment, there are still some planes that are taking off, although with how gusty the winds are right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they're pulling a ground stop locally for planes trying to take off in that. As you have storms coming over, one of the things that they look out for very much is downward winds, downburst winds. That's a huge threat to planes trying to take off and land, and it has led in the past to airline accidents. So I just wanted to point that out. They're taking off. I'm just looking at radar here on my phone. In this particular storm that's down by the airport, there's also a little bit of broad rotation that I'm watching as well. So we're just looking at that camera right there, and I'm watching the rotation on my phone right here. And there's also, yeah, there's a little bit of broad rotation there. So we've actually got three of us here right now. Chief Meteorologist Chris Holcomb, Nicole Hartford, Meteorologist Nicole Hartford, and myself are here tracking these storms as they move through the North Georgia region. But the winds really, that rain about 2 minutes ago when we first came on for this extended live stream was very intense. There is a severe thunderstorm watch that's in effect until 8 o'clock this evening. Likely we will see this canceled far before that. So by 4 o'clock, the severe threat's going to be over for the large majority of us. In fact, for the Atlanta area, we only have about another hour to 2 hours to go, I would say, for this severe potential today. So we're watching that for you, and it's this broken line of thunderstorms that's been advancing. I'm going to actually loop this for you so you can see. These are pressing to the east-southeast, and the further south and east that they go, we expect them to become stronger. And the reason why is there is more energy in the atmosphere, warmer temperatures, more instability, which is fuel for thunderstorms. So we do expect them to get stronger the further south and east that they go. And right now we don't have any current warnings, so to speak, but these are intense, strong thunderstorms. And we'll zoom in for you on the map, and you can see some of these heavier downpours and embedded thunderstorms on the eastern side of town. So this is really through the heart of Gwinnett County, anywhere from Decula down through Snellville, and that's pushing southeast, so in towards Walton County and Monroe. And then we also see this extension of that heavy rain over Tucker in northern DeKalb County. So that's right over the east side of the perimeter, really heavy rain coming down there. We know that there are areas in Atlanta, roads that flood so easily, and I do expect that east side of the perimeter to be one of those problem spots, as well as we typically see some flooding on the southeast side of the perimeter, and that's where one of these other little cells is heading into right now. I'll take the radar down there. This is the one that was over the airport. This is the one that I'm also watching a little bit of rotation on. You can see that right here. And this is from our radar that's looking from Peachtree City. I'm going to take this radar and glance at the airport one, if it'll let me. It's kind of right on top of the airport. Bit noisy there. All right, so we'll go back to the Peachtree City one to look at that. So a little bit of broad rotation, something we're watching, and also that could just mean that the thunderstorm's pulsing up and it's going to pulse back down sometimes when we see those red and green colors on the map next to each other. But Max is freezing up. Here we go. Okay, so that was over the city. Now we're going to go south and west into our suburbs down I-85. Coweta County, you had a tornado touchdown in EF1 on Tuesday. And here we go. There's another thunderstorm on top of you right now. There's no rotation in at the moment, but it is producing potentially 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. There's a special weather statement out on this thunderstorm. So this is right over the south side of Noonan, right over, if we zoom in a little bit more, Highway 29. This is right over kind of Noonan Crossings area, and that's pushing southeast in towards Turin and eventually in towards a place like Sonoy as well, and then Grantville. And then the western extent of that, pushing through western Georgia, is right now moving through southern Heard County, the community of Texas. And you can see back to the west, there's more thunderstorms coming in from Alabama. Those are going to be targeting a place like LaGrange this afternoon. So there's a lot that we're tracking for you. These thunderstorms today will get more intense, a little bit stronger the further south and east that we go. I also want to talk about what's happening in northeast Georgia, where we didn't get to quite yet. We've got some thunderstorms with heavy rain, some embedded lightning. One of those right now over Banks County, over Homer. That's going to be crossing I-85, not far from Commerce and a little bit north of Brazelton. So we'll be watching that one as it moves in that direction. And then another thunderstorm heading in towards Athens. Let me position the radar a little bit closer to that. And we'll go back here, position it closer to Athens. That's over Bogart, and that's moving southeast and towards Athens and Clark County. So no warnings, but it is the peak time for daytime heating in North Georgia, and that means these storms can get stronger the further south and east that we go. Also to the south of the metro, a few discrete little pop-up thunderstorms and downpours in advance of the main cluster of thunderstorms. Those are right now moving through southeastern Lamar County, also northern Upson County, not far from Thomaston. That's pushing to the southeast. These don't look like they have any characteristics on them right now that I'm very concerned about at the moment, but if we see that lightning count going up, that's often a sign that the storms are intensifying. So again, severe thunderstorm watch. These storms are racing to the east-southeast, and as they do so, have the potential to become stronger. So really, this area in here from Athens down into Oglethorpe County, down towards Madison and Walton and Monroe counties, we're going to see that potential for stronger thunderstorm activity than what it's producing right now. And in a setup like this, with how soggy the ground is, it doesn't take a severe thunderstorm to cause damage. We have a level 2 threat of severe weather over the area today. Damaging winds the biggest player. We add more heavy rain on top of the rain we've already seen, and that could mean we have standing water on the roadways. And this is a live picture from our weather impact tracker. Liza Lucas is out in that, and she's up in I-75 Marietta region in Cobb County. It looks like she's just past the 120 loop, coming up on Delk Road shortly. You can see the traffic because of all the heavy rain that had moved through. But what she's going to be looking out for today are the damage. It's the damage that we see, whether it be standing water on the roads, which we do have some reports of already, some standing water. We just got some in from Karis Belger. She had sent in some videos along Peachtree Industrial Boulevard. In fact, it looks like there are some cars that were stranded in water. Just got that into the newsroom a couple of minutes ago. So a viewer sent in some pictures and videos of that, but Liza's on her way to see if any trees are coming down or if there is more flooding on this Friday afternoon. But what are the storm threats we're talking about? Street flooding, possibility today. Gusty winds, and those damaging winds, again, it only takes a 40, 50 mile per hour gust to down some trees when the ground is so soggy. Those trees give way by the root system a lot easier, and then a lower end chance there could be a brief tornado or that potential for some hail as well. So cloudy skies over Atlanta right now. We're in the mid 70s, and I want to show you the forecast track into the afternoon, because I think this is important to show you how things trend hour by hour. The metro is really ground zero for storms between now and 2:30 this afternoon, and those storms are really intensifying more on the eastern side of the metro than what we're seeing in some of the radar signatures in west central Georgia, but that doesn't mean that these couldn't turn stronger as well. I just think we'll be more tuned in to potential damaging winds in a place like Athens and Monroe than back in maybe Douglas County or so. So we're tracking the storms now. This is going to clear out by later on this evening. And we roll through this forecast track. We didn't roll it through it all the way. All right, so here's where they are right now. Push the forecast track out. You see at 2, 3 o'clock really rolling through those southeastern counties. And then by 5 o'clock today, the storms are gone. So that severe thunderstorm watch that's in effect until 8 o'clock will likely be canceled early. Now, the model that I just showed you, that was our graph model. Let me show you a different model. This is that was her model. This is our graph model, which really blows the storms up a little bit more over the next 30 minutes. And then you can see as we take this forecast track out, it keeps the southern extent of the line just as strong as that eastern extent. But what I like that this shows is kind of this bowing segment here. It shows more of that wind damage threat than the her model. So that also has a similar time frame, 3 o'clock, moving through our southeastern counties, and then really after 4 o'clock, we should be in the clear and dry weather moves back in over the weekend. Now, for your weekend forecast, we look dry on Saturday, looks really nice, a little bit of a northwest breeze. Sunday, there will be some more showers coming into play, but the rain chance overall looks pretty low. It'll be that northeastern corner of the state where there are some showers and storms that could be moving through later on in the day. But in the meantime, our focus is on this round of thunderstorms. It is the last round before we catch a little bit of a break this weekend. Again, severe thunderstorm watch continues, and we'll have another update on TV on 11Alive coming up in about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes. And then back here, if we get any new warnings that pop up, or at the top of the hour, you can see Liza in that rain right there. The top of the hour, we'll be back here to talk more about the storms moving in. I'll close this out. One last look at radar around the metro. You can see Liza's now hit that heavy rainfall. We've got a thunderstorm right over the southern half of Cobb County. That includes Smyrna, that includes Mableton. It's moving in towards Six Flags, and that's going to be moving right in towards that top side of Atlanta. So through North Side, through West Midtown, through kind of Buckhead region, out towards Brookhaven again, and eventually the downtown connector as well. Another strong thunderstorm through southern Gwinnett County. That's also pushing southeast towards Monroe. Lightning counts up near Winder as well. And then another heavy downpour in southern DeKalb County. That one right now is now outside of the perimeter, so over Panthersville Road and moving to the southeast closer to Stonecrest Mall as we head throughout the next 20 minutes or so. That's also going to be pushing southeast in towards northern Henry County. And remember, Henry County is where we had that EF2 that touched down yesterday afternoon. So this will be lifting and pushing to the southeast in that direction. All right, that's your latest update here at 1:30. The next update coming up on TV in about 10 minutes. And then we'll be back here on Weather Impact 24/7 at the top of the hour. We'll see you then. o'clock, and we're still tracking these strong thunderstorms moving over North Georgia and metro Atlanta right now. This is our tower camera, which is several hundred feet up, and you can see we can't see the city skyline. Rain coming down in sheets, gusty winds as well. Let me show you a different camera. This one is our camera in Midtown at Georgia Tech, and blinding rain, reduced visibility. We're seeing those wind gusts at times that could be around 40 miles per hour. This camera from our camera in looks like our Decatur camera right now, also showing those dark skies off in the distance. And you know, in Atlanta itself, a lot of the heavy rain is coming to an end. We kind of got the back edge of that front right over the top side of the perimeter, but it's to the east, south, and southwest where we're seeing these intensifying thunderstorms. We don't have any warnings on them right now, but the storms as they move further south and east could become severe. Right now, a lot of these are given what we call special weather statements, where it may not reach that warning criteria of 60 mile per hour winds, but we still have some gusts to about 40 miles per hour. And that is enough when you have soggy ground to down some trees. There's also a little bit of an enhanced threat that some of these could show some signs of rotation. So that's another facet of this radar data that we're looking through as we get new scans in every couple of minutes. Where we're seeing the storms in the inner metro right now are kind of on the south and eastern side of town. So one heavy thunderstorm here stretching throughout Fulton County and also DeKalb County, and then another thunderstorm right between Conyers and Covington along I-20. So that has some lightning, some heavy rainfall with it. We'll zoom into this one in the perimeter, just about getting to Zoo Atlanta, East Atlanta as well, and then anywhere from kind of Druid Hills Road, North Druid Hills Road down to Belvedere Park. We've got a lot of that heavy rain, and it's the leading edge of this where some of those wind gusts could be a little bit stronger. That heavy rain is just east of the downtown connector, and you can see on the eastern side of your screen right now, that's our live weather impact tracker camera, which is where Liza Lucas is heading out, driving through the downtown connector right now. She's passing kind of Georgia Tech, it looks like. She just passed North Avenue, coming off of that exit to get off to Centennial Olympic Park, and she's about to head towards that kind of Grady curve in a couple of minutes in the I-20 corridor. So she's heading into more of that heavy rainfall. But where we expect the strongest winds with this is through DeKalb County and also Gwinnett County. We'll take that vantage point out further to the east through Gwinnett County, also out towards Walton County and Monroe County. And you can see heavy thunderstorm here between Monroe and Campton, and also out into Barrow County here and Oconee County. A lot of heavy rain and enhanced lightning strikes there over Watkinsville. That's moving southeast and towards Elder and towards Botswick as well. And then, you know, no warnings on these, but as these storms pulse up, we certainly could see those wind threats increasing over a matter of 10 minutes or so in some of these cells. Let's go to the south. Okay, we've zoomed into the east. Let me take my radar back out to the south. You can see through our southern suburbs, 675, 75 split in through Stockbridge and down into Henry County. We see the rain increasing as well. Little pocket of heavier rain over Stockbridge. Luckily, no lightning on this. Remember yesterday at 3:30 in the afternoon or so, we had an EF2 tornado touchdown right in here. So there's a lot of damage that is just now beginning to be picked up or sorted through today. Let's go further south and west. Corner of Fayette County, western Spalding County, and also eastern Coweta County. Here's another thunderstorm right over Haralson, not Haralson County, but Haralson the city, southeast of Sonoy. That's moving southeast into Pike County. So that'll be moving in towards Zebulon here. And again, these kind of have special weather statements on them, but we don't have. Let's see if we can get back to live VMix. There we go. We don't have the same severe thunderstorm warning criteria met quite yet. These are still just special weather statements on these thunderstorms. Also some of that heavy rain through Luthersville, northern Meriwether County, and LaGrange and central Troup County. Some heavy rain pushing in there, and then back to the south and west in Alabama, watching some of those. In advance of where we have kind of this broken line of storms, there's more of these discrete cells, so to speak, where they're by themselves, and these will produce heavy rain, produce lightning, and sometimes when we get these little cells ahead of the main line. We'll watch them for a little bit of rotation. Haven't seen much of that in these so far today, but that's something that we'll keep our eye on as we head into the afternoon. So storms are racing to the east, southeast, and we've got another couple of hours to go of turbulent weather before things start to improve. And speaking of turbulent weather, a ground stop was issued at the airport at 1 o'clock today for incoming flights. So if you have somebody who's trying to fly back into Atlanta for the weekend, they currently are probably not allowed to take off. They probably delayed. So we had a ground stop for incoming flights, and at times we saw kind of a pause in those outgoing flights as well. We remain in the severe thunderstorm watch. This runs until 8 o'clock this evening, but will likely be canceled earlier than that because the severe threat will be coming to an end. You can see our severe weather outlook for today. Level 2 risk south and east of Atlanta and inside Atlanta, and then where the storms will get their strongest, that's probably across southeastern Georgia, Augusta, down to Savannah, and that's where there is a level 3 risk of severe weather. So we'll be watching out for damaging winds, heavy rainfall, and there's also that very low end chance that we could see a tornado, brief spin up tornado, or some hail. And with these strong winds today, I've talked about it a couple of times, but I want to show you again, it's been a really wet May. Look at our statistics. We've had almost 7 inches of rain, more than double what's considered normal for this month. So we've had a lot of rain. The ground is saturated, and this brings 2 components into today's forecast. Number 1, the ground cannot absorb the water. So we end up with standing water, ponding water on the roadways a lot easier than if we had drier ground. We introduce more heavy rain on top of soggy ground. It doesn't absorb the water as quickly. So we end up with these street flooding issues. And then number 2, that means that storms coming in with strong wind gusts, even if they're not severe criteria, can down some trees by the root system a lot easier. So winds, the main threat today. That's, you can see on this breakdown of one of our severe threats today, an elevated risk of wind damage, low risk of hail, and a very low chance of a brief spin-up tornado. So we're watching all of those for you. Let's go through forecast track just to kind of recap what we're expecting. Storms are over the metro right now. I'm actually going to show you a different model. I'm going to show you our graph model. That was the HER model. Here we go, the graph model. I like this one a little bit better. It shows the storms over the metro area right now. Let's push it out to 2:30 this afternoon, moving through Covington, Peachtree City, Thomaston, Eatonton, arriving there as well. And then by 4 o'clock today, we'll see that those storms are coming to an end and dry weather starts to move back in as we get towards the evening commute. And then we should see dry weather sticking around all throughout the day on Saturday. So no warnings right now, but we're tracking these strong, intense thunderstorms with some gusts to 40 miles per hour, intense cloud to ground lightning possible in a few of them, and also that potential for some gusty winds to 40 miles per hour and heavy rainfall. Still just special weather statements coming out. Not any warnings on these, but something we're watching very closely for you. We'll have our next extended update coming up at the bottom of the hour at 2:30. And if we do get any warnings where we're talking about severe warnings, or of course tornado warnings will be on Real TV, but severe warnings will pop back on here on 11 Live Plus if that happens before 2:30. We'll see then. It is 2:30. Here's your next update on the storms moving through North Georgia. I'm meteorologist Melissa Nord with your weather impact forecast for today. And tracking over Athens, we've had some heavy rain move through. Now the rain's finally starting to lighten up there, but I've got our camera pulled up, and this is looking south in towards southern Clark and southern Oconee counties. Also a big improvement in a matter of 30 minutes over Atlanta. This is our live camera in Midtown. We're seeing the rain is wrapping up here and brightening of skies moving back in, but intense thunderstorms with heavy rainfall, light of lightning, the potential for some gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour, and also a little bit of rotation in some of these at times this afternoon. So where the strongest of storms are moving through some of our eastern counties. We also have a cluster of thunderstorms down here heading down 85 to LaGrange area that's moving through as well. So we'll zoom in a little bit more, and you can see we still got some light rain coming down in Athens, but where it picks up in intensity, that's throughout through eastern Morgan County and also heading into southern Coney County. This is Walton County, not Walton, I'm so sorry, Oglethorpe County, different O. And in Oglethorpe County, we did have a report actually that there were trees down all over one of the roadways. Let me pull up the roadway name for you. That was Collier Church Road in Smithsonia. And the trees were coming down with blinding rain, gusty winds, and it almost caused some accidents. So really intense weather moving through Oglethorpe County right now. We are seeing a lot of lightning within these. We're not seeing anything this structured that screams to us we're seeing gusts over 60 miles per hour as of right now, but still very intense just south of Crawford. And then you can also see some of that really heavy rain and lightning southeast of Monroe. And then if we go a little further south, we've got this kind of discrete cell by itself. This one is moving closer to Madison, Georgia State Highway 83. That has some lightning. We'll watch kind of a little bit of broad rotation in that at times to the south as well, but no warning on it. Also in this cell, moving into Henry County right now, we've got Clayton County over here, and that rain is really moving through northern Henry County, down through Stockbridge, eventually in towards McDonough. And then this is Rockdale County right here, more heavy rain that's starting to press south and east out towards that I-20 corridor. Okay, to the south, we've got more of these heavy thunderstorms. Little tiny downpours still remaining throughout western Douglas County and eastern Carroll County, but it's this little line segment right here where we have the more intense part of the thunderstorm through eastern Pike County, back into Meriwether County near the community of Gay, and that's moving southeast in towards Meansville, and then back to the south and west of that, Troup County. Couple little lightning strikes, few areas of heavy rain, but nothing that is noting a really strong signature on that right now. And then more downpours getting out of our viewing area in towards the Macon area. So this is a quick moving broken line of thunderstorms, and it's all coming through and sweeping through ahead of a cold front. So when we have something like a cold front, that's called a lifting mechanism. We get more uplift. It creates more thunderstorm activity. And if we get a little bit of change of wind direction with height, we can see more of that tornado threat. If we just have strong winds aloft like we do in this setup, we have more of that damaging wind threat. And those 850 winds, that millibar winds about a mile above the surface, are also really aiding to push these storms swiftly off to the south and east. So this was never going to be an event for us where we said, okay, it's going to rain at your house for 4 hours straight. It's a quick hitting punch of thunderstorms, and once they get out of here, we have dry weather moving in for the start of the weekend. We remain under our severe thunderstorm watch. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this goes until 8. That seems a little bit excessive. It does, to be completely frank with you. I think we'll probably see these canceled off for some of our northern counties within the next 30 minutes to an hour, hopefully. But at this point, the severe weather threat is done for Atlanta. The severe weather threat is done for Cobb County. Where it does remain, I'll pull up the radar still. And I'll kind of draw on here where we still have the threat of strong thunderstorms and then where we do not. So if you are southeast of this line, so really Athens, southeast of Newnan through Troup County, you could still see a strong thunderstorm. If you're north and west of this line, you're done. You're done. So there might be a couple of lingering showers, but the severe threat is further to your south and east. I was just looking at new information coming in, and it looks like the National Weather Service in Birmingham is starting to cancel off some of those counties. So if we go back to our watches map, look, they've canceled off. We had these counties, Cleburne and Randolph, in the watch. They've canceled that off. So we're waiting to see when the Weather Service in Atlanta will cancel off some of the counties here. But in the meantime, the focus is on the potential for some stronger storms as the line moves southeast. So here's the forecast track. You can see the storms right now positioned pretty closely to where they actually are on radar, from Troup County all the way up into Athens. So that's a pretty good depiction of what radar looks like right now. These storms keep moving southeast. 3 o'clock, really quickly getting out of Athens, pushing through Butts County, Pike, Lamar, Upson. You're still getting hit by these storms at 3 o'clock today. Then we'll push it out to 4 o'clock and pause things. And at this point, we're done with severe weather. So I would expect before the next top of the hour, 3 o'clock, hopefully we'll see some of the counties in the metro canceled off. But some of our southeastern counties, they'll probably keep that watch going until 4, maybe 4:30 at the latest, and they should cancel everybody else off after that. So the severe threat again is done for Atlanta. With south and east, we're still tracking some of those stronger storms. And this is the outlook for today. Again, we have a level 2 risk of severe weather for our southeastern counties where we're still tracking thunderstorms. The other thing that will come out this afternoon is they'll update this graphic. The Storm Prediction Center will. Even though there's this level 1, level 2, you're done. You're done with severe storms. Technically, there's still an outlook out for you, but I don't expect anything strong to move in. So that is what we're watching right now over the afternoon. These storms continuing to push east, damaging winds, the primary severe weather threat, heavy rainfall, and even if we don't see warnings on the map, you add a gust of 40 miles per hour on top of saturated ground, trees can come down a lot easier by the root system. So that's one of the things that we're going to be keeping our eyes out for this afternoon. We've had a couple of reports of some trees down, one of which in Douglas County. We had a report of treated on a power line in Winston, Georgia, along Post Road. You can also see on the bottom right of the screen, this is flooding not far from, is this Peachtree Industrial Boulevard? Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, you can see some of that flooding, somebody wading through it, some cars trying to drive through it. On the top of the screen, you see our live weather impact tracker camera. They're heading to a site where we've heard that there are some trees down, so we hope to get some images for you here. If not the top of the hour, then when we go on the news at 4 o'clock. So that's your latest live weather update here. Again, we're tracking these storms. There's no warnings on them, but watching the potential for gusty winds, 40 to 50 miles per hour. And we could see some of these intensify and reach severe criteria. Specifically, I'm looking at that Oglethorpe, kind of lower Oconee County, moving in towards Greene County storm. And then also looking out towards, let's see here, southern Pike County, to see if this one intensifies a little bit as well. So that is your latest live radar update. And remember, we're back here at the top of the hour again for another extended update on Weather Impact 24/7. We'll see you then.
Good afternoon. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Holcomb, live in the 11Alive Weather Impact Team, and we have been giving you these extended updates throughout the afternoon as we are tracking these storms here. And of course, we're doing these extended updates on 11Alive Plus and our Weather 24/7 channel as well here at 11Alive Plus. And so far, these storms have been relatively behaving. We have not had any severe thunderstorm warnings. We've not had any tornado warnings yet. We've had numerous special weather statements that the National Weather Service has been issuing. And within those statements, they have been saying an increased risk for tornadoes as they push down toward the south and the east. Now, a severe thunderstorm has to have winds of 57, 58 miles an hour or greater to be classified as a severe thunderstorm, or have hail that would be an inch in diameter or larger. And so far, we haven't met that criteria yet as these storms have been moving through. But they issue special statements when they see winds 30, 40, maybe even 50 miles an hour and some smaller hail. So that's what they have been issuing so far because these storms have been remaining below what we classify as severe. Now, we've got some good news that we're talking about here for Metro Atlanta as we're watching the back edge of these storms moving away from us now. We still have a few of those lingering here on the south side. That will keep pushing down to the south. North Georgia, northwest Georgia, and west Georgia are looking good, and we're going to continue to see all of this move away, but we still have to watch this quadrant here to the south and east of the city where we still have that potential for these stronger storms, as well as maybe they'll begin to intensify a little bit more. The atmosphere there, south and east of the city, is a little more favorable and a little more conducive for the potential for some of these storms to fire up as these are moving in really during the heating of the day. So here's a closer look at the city of Atlanta where we're seeing that back edge move through. We do still have these showers here on the south side where we're watching that heavier rain continue to push on through around Forest Park. Over the airport, we're seeing some of those showers around too. I keep checking the special statements that are coming in on my phone. So far, the latest one is for down around the Macon area. No new special statements for us right now. But as you can see here, we have this heavier rain in parts of South Fulton County, on the north end of Fayette right here, also into much of Clayton County around Forest Park. The airport still getting some rain. That slides on over to the northern parts of Henry County here, and then to the southern parts of Rockdale, and then over toward Newton County where we have those more moderate showers and pockets of heavy rain still moving through. And then that keeps stretching out I-20 toward Madison and toward the Lake Oconee area too. And then lighter showers in parts of Henry County. So this is really just the last little surge of rain and moisture that's moving through. So in Atlanta, we're done. We're done in Atlanta and areas north of the city. And once that clears over Covington and Madison over in Morgan County, over Morgan County, areas north of I-20 will be in the all clear. So we just have to get this part pushing away and through Greensboro as well. And then we'll be focusing on south of I-20 still for any development of any stronger storms that are possible for the rest of the afternoon hours. And here you see out I-20 where you've got Madison, Greensboro. This is Lake Oconee right here. Still some of those showers coming through. We've got a cluster of lightning in parts of Morgan County, and we've been keeping an eye on that storm. It was kind of showing us some interesting characteristics with maybe some broad rotation within that. But so far we haven't seen that fire up even more or get a little bit tighter. So really, in a lot of these storms, we have been watching just some small areas of some brief rotation possible, but nothing was ever strong enough to issue any tornado warnings out of that. And as you can see, south of I-20, that's where most of the action is. But look, over in Carroll County, you've seen the back edge already move through, also into parts of Heard County, Troup County, that's continuing to push on out. We just still have to watch behind this, still just these last little bits still ahead of that front that have been developing. Down in Griffin, things are looking better. Pike Lamar County, you still have some of those heavier showers with thunder and lightning there. That's about to push into Upson County, so still some action going on down there. And then again, over toward Eatonton and over in parts of East Georgia, still some of that thunder and lightning that's still on the north side here of I-20, and that's going to keep pushing away as well. So we expect to see some improvements here, and this is the good news about this system. We're going to watch all this move away, and then nothing else is moving in. A little wrap around moisture over in parts of Tennessee, but we're thinking all of that is going to stay to the north. Also, these yellow areas here that you see here where we have the severe thunderstorm watch in effect. We've got one in Alabama, one over us, severe thunderstorm watch back into parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, and then it changes up into tornado watches in parts of North Carolina. But we do expect bits of these watches to be taken away soon. Here is a look at, Connie Yancey sent us this out of the Campton area of just the really heavy rain that was coming down outside of her garage and the porch there. And you can see that water really kind of rushing over the gutters as well. We're getting some additional videos and pictures in from our weather impact team members here. This is another one at the top of your screen that you see there. That was from the flooding up around Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, where the water was really collecting in some of those low-lying areas. With the heavy rain that came through, it was brief, but it was heavy, and cars were having to kind of navigate their way through that heavier water as that continued to move on through the area. Here is a live look right now in Atlanta. This is a good look at what we're seeing out there right now. With the clouds that are still with us, the rain has already pushed through the Atlanta area, but now we're going to wait for the clouds that'll be breaking up, and we expect that to happen soon as we see some nicer weather that's going to start moving in. Now the wind is going to shift, come out of the north and west, pushing that rain out of here, bringing in the drier air and allowing that sunshine to come through and break through those clouds too. This is our live look in Athens. We were seeing some good heavy rain coming down in Athens right now. We moved the camera to look more toward the south and west here, and those clouds are going to start breaking up in the Athens area too. So here's a severe thunderstorm watch. We really expect, and when this was issued, I posted on social media that yes, this is in effect until 8 o'clock, but I also added there that we don't think the Atlanta counties are going to be staying in this until 8 o'clock. That's because the storms are already pushing through. So really, I'm expecting any time now for the National Weather Service to start taking some of these counties away, especially those north of I-85, north and west of I-85, and then they'll just kind of take it in tiers as they'll take away a few more rows of counties as those storms continue to move away. So for us, really, the severe weather threat's over here in the Atlanta area. But so we'll wait for them to start removing some of these counties, and then you'll see these disappearing, and they'll hold on to these counties to the south where those storms are still going on. So much better outlook as we go through the rest of the evening hours tonight. We issued this weather impact alert yesterday for the storms today to go through about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm really thinking that timeline is going to be fine. After 4 p.m., really for most of our areas, we'll be able to see most of that rain out of here and that severe weather threat. And that threat has mainly been heavy rain, the potential for some of those strong winds. We've had some spotty areas reporting maybe a tree down here and there, but nothing really widespread. But continue to be weather aware, especially south and east of the city, as those storms continue to move away from us and push away too. This is another thing that's going to be updated soon from the Storm Prediction Center. I know you see this level 1 risk in northwest Georgia. You don't have to worry about that anymore. The storms have already moved past your area, and even much of this level 2 risk, the yellow that you see in the metro area, that should shift more down to the south soon. Still holding on to the level 3 risk down to the south and east of us, including parts of southeast Georgia. As those storms move through there, their atmosphere and environment has been able to heat up a little bit more in the daytime heating. So as those storms continue to push into this direction, they're going to still get some of that fuel and some of that heating to add more lift to those clouds and to this system, which will still give them the chance for some of the severe storms to push on through. So the timing today has kind of been in our favor, that we got the storms coming in before we had the optimum heating of the day. And so that's why these storms have pretty much been behaving for most of the afternoon hours. Now, for those storms south and east of the city, the main threats we're watching: moderate risk for heavy rain and the strong winds. Those are the main things we're looking for. Now, the tornado risk is on the low end. It's not zero, but pretty much on the low end there. The same thing with the hail. We've had some reports of some small hail, but nothing particularly large and nothing really widespread. But again, there's that potential for some hail to develop. Now, look what's happened to the temperatures along with this rain. Right now, we're at 74 degrees. Earlier, we had temperatures in the 80s down to the south of us. LaGrange was in the 80s a little bit earlier. Thomaston Houston is at 77 right now. But remember, that rain is falling right along this quadrant right here. South of that, remember what I was telling you, as we have that heating in southeast Georgia, as those storms move in here, it's going to push into that heat, and that's going to help to add that lift and continue to let those storms develop and potentially get stronger. But for us, we never really got to that optimum heating of the day, and now we have the rain-cooled air that is keeping us there in the mid-70s right now. Canton 72, Gainesville 73. Athens just dropped down to 68 degrees with the rain-cooled air there too. Now, I do think these temperatures will rebound a little bit into the afternoon now that the rain is gone, and we're going to see the clouds break up, and we'll still have the potential for a few hours of sunshine here before it sets a little bit later on. So these temperatures still may rise a little bit, but we don't have to worry about that adding any fuel to the atmosphere because the storms are already gone. So we can just enjoy the warm up instead of being fearful of that warm up causing any other issues. We started off this morning in the 60s. I wanted to show you this because of these temperatures. At 1 o'clock, we got up to 77 degrees. You see that right there? And then the rain came in, and that's when those temperatures started falling with that rain-cooled air. So that was one of the impacts we had there. So yes, we did get up to around 77, but we stayed below 80, and now we're seeing those temperatures a little cooler. And we, again, might pop back up a little bit there too. This model's keeping us at 74 through about 6 o'clock. And then 71 at 8. And as this drier air starts moving in, we're going to see clear skies out there tonight too. The dew points will fall, and as the drier air and dew points go down, that will help our temperatures to begin to fall a little bit more too. And we're expecting to get down into the upper 50s here by tomorrow morning. So that'll be a nice cool start. And with that drier air and lower humidity, when you walk out your door on Saturday morning, whether it's to go to work, whether it's to go to exercise, whether it's to go to sit on the back porch, you're going to notice not only the cooler air, but also the fact that it's not going to be one of those muggy mornings out there. It's going to be really nice and refreshing to start the day. So here we go. We're seeing those storms to the south of us. Watch the progress there as we get to 5 o'clock, continuing to move away and continuing to move out. And then it's this northwest flow that's moving in, clearing out the clouds, bringing in that drier air. And when I say drier air, I mean more than just not rain. It's drier air in the form of the humidity levels that are going to be going down too. Tonight, it's going to be looking pretty nice out there. And then here we go. This is the Saturday we've been waiting on for a while. It seems like we've been just stuck in this pattern for a while. It seems like we've had numerous weekends with rain. Well, Saturday morning is going to be beautiful when you step outside. Mostly sunny skies for a big part of the day here on Saturday. There could be a couple little clouds that mix in here and there, but temperatures go up into the lower 80s for highs. And then heading into Sunday morning, another nice start. We may see a few more clouds mixing in on Sunday, and then late Sunday we're going to be watching up in far north Georgia for a couple of spotty showers possible. As of right now, we're including just a 20% chance for an isolated shower here later on Sunday. Again, the model's trying to kick up a couple little showers here and there, but it's not going to be anything widespread or anything strong or anything with a lot of strength with it for any severe weather. But we'll keep an eye on that for Sunday, and then that sweeps through. Monday morning is also looking good, and through the day Monday, another really nice day here too. So check out this Saturday planner. We start off in the 50s, and then we do come up into the lower 80s. Plenty of sunshine during the day, maybe a couple of more clouds there in the afternoon. But it's going to be a nice day, and we deserve it. We deserve to have a nice Saturday here. And this is another reason why it's going to feel nice. The blue color indicates the very dry air. The blues and the purples there, where you see the lighter colors, the greens and yellows, that's where we have the moisture around, where we've got the rain and the high humidity. So watch this line behind that front. Look how that moves down very quickly. That's the drier air, the lower humidity, the less mugginess that's going to be pushing our way. That sticks with us on Saturday. Sunday, mainly dry here, lower humidity into Monday as well. Tuesday's looking good. But then as we get into the middle and end of the week, we start to see a little bit of this moisture trying to build from the west. And we will see just a lower rain chance building back in once we get toward the end of the week. Here's a look at the dew point scale. And the dew points in the 60s now. Pretty muggy, kind of humid, but that's what I'm talking about. When they dip down on Saturday into the 50s, it's going to make it feel a lot more comfortable. Low rain chance Sunday, and then into next week, we are looking rather dry as well. So here is that 7-day outlook where we have those temperatures at about 81 on Saturday, 82 on Sunday, and still including just that 20% chance for a shower here during the day on Sunday, later in the day really, but that's not going to be anything really widespread. Then look at Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Looking nice, mostly sunny. Warming up though, mid 80s on Monday, 87 Tuesday, upper 80s Wednesday and Thursday. And then getting into Thursday and Friday, we will introduce about a 30% chance for a shower Thursday, going to about a 40% chance for showers here into Friday as well. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, do us a favor and download on your television the 11Alive Plus app. We often do these extended weather updates there on the app, as well as a lot of other great weather content throughout the day that you can see at any time. And also when you're at our 11Alive Plus app, be sure and look at the Weather Impact 24/7 part of the carousel for a lot more weather information. So thanks for joining us. We'll have other updates throughout the afternoon and our newscast coming up at 4 o'clock.
is 3:30 and we are almost done with these thunderstorms moving north Georgia. I am meteorologist Melissa Nord here with Chief Meteorologist Chris Holcomb. He is getting ready for our shows today, and you know what? Looks much better in Athens than it did about 30 minutes to an hour ago, as well as in Midtown. Our camera at Georgia Tech, you can see the skies are brightening up a little bit. Now, we're not done everywhere with rain, but up north and northwest of Atlanta, we've got brightening of skies happening right now. This is our live camera in Blue Ridge. The streets are still damp from all of that rain earlier on today, but where we're still tracking rain, we're seeing even some embedded thunderstorms. Here's the deal though. These storms are intensifying as this area pushes into South Carolina. That's one area that's turning stronger. And we've also got this other segment that's turning a lot stronger back in Alabama. So sometimes when we have these clusters that turn stronger, in the middle we just kind of like miss it and they rob us of some of the energy. So these storms pushing into central Georgia, not nearly as intense as what this cluster is probably going to be doing, and this cluster is probably going to be doing back in Alabama and South Carolina. So we still have some heavy rainfall, still some embedded thunderstorms, but they are almost out of here. This is the last line of heavy rain near the I-20 corridor. You can see most of that pushing out towards Crawford County, but still some heavy rain in Greene County, also out towards Madison in Morgan County, and then in southern Newton County. We also have some locally heavy rain, and we can actually zoom in and show you some of that right on top of Greensboro. U.S. Highway 278 as well, that runs all the way through Greene County. South of I-20 is where the heavy rain pockets are there in Newton County. And if we look a little further to the west, we also see this pocket of heavy rain that's dropping south through Henry County. So that's going to be passing through McDonough, past Atlanta Motor Speedway, and eventually down in towards Locust Grove, where we had yesterday's EF2 tornado. Okay, back to the south and west. We're now in the clear for Troup County, Meriwether County, Pike, Lamar, you're done with severe weather at this point. A little bit in Monroe County and also Thomaston of some of that brief heavy rainfall. But this is pretty much almost into central Georgia. You can still see a couple of lightning strikes there in the southern little tip of Lamar County. But here it is, our watch, the rounds of thunderstorms, that line of thunderstorms pushing to the south. If we zoom out the satellite and radar, you can see some wraparound moisture coming in from the north. It's possible we could see a couple of sprinkles kind of northeast Georgia as we head throughout the rest of the afternoon. Some of this moisture pivoting in, enough to produce some thunderstorms there back into northwestern Tennessee and also southern Kentucky. But where the energy is for severe weather is really racing in through just looking at, let's see here, tornado damage survey. Okay, so this is moving out. We just got the damage survey information in. This is peak. Let me go back to a different graphic. Sorry, when you see me on these live streams pulling up my phone, I get messages from the Weather Service, and this just saying they're putting out the information on the tornado in Henry County. So they're saying this was EF2. I'm going to update these. This was 135 miles per hour for the winds, but the path of this, you know, this thing spun up very quickly. It was on the ground for less than 2 miles, 1.82 miles, and also being a high-end EF2, it, put this in here, high-end EF2, it was not a very wide tornado, 200 yards across, which is not very wide. So what I'm going to do after I finish this live stream, we'll actually get the plot here of where the tornado touched down, but that was on the north side of Locust Grove. I just want to read this to you because I think this is good to read as we're on this live stream. I know we're still tracking some stronger storms right now, but this is the big news story of the day yesterday. So survey summary. This is from meteorologist in charge Keith Stellman from the Weather Service. An EF2 tornado with maximum winds of 135 miles per hour. That's the top of the scale for EF2. If it's 136 miles per hour, it's an EF3. So a strong EF2 tornado developed very quickly during the afternoon hours of May 29, 2025. A storm which had a history of very weak and broad rotation moved into southern Henry County, and very quickly spawned a tornado as it crossed Bethlehem Road at approximately 3:31 Eastern Daylight Time. Just north of Bethlehem Road, a few trees were down where the tornado first touched down. As it tracked northeast, it quickly intensified into an EF1, snapping and uprooting trees in a wooded region behind several homes along Curry Ridge in the Laurel Creek subdivision. And that's where all of our coverage has been really focused over the last 24 hours, is in that Laurel Creek subdivision. It reached its maximum intensity at Fresh Laurel Lane. Several homes sustained EF1 damage near the end of the road, including a significant loss of shingles, siding, and windows blown out, and in one instance, a partial collapse of the roof and wall structure. The last home on the street is where the tornado reached its maximum intensity of EF2. The home was completely destroyed, with the exception of a small interior closet on the first floor where clothes were still hanging. Both occupants were critically injured, one of which is critically, and we know that was an 18-year-old son of an actor on a Netflix show. We have an article on 11alive.com about that. He was thrown 287 feet from the house into the nearby woods, according to Henry County Emergency Management. The home demonstrated strength in construction with the attached baseboards using clips. However, the failure point in the home was where the wall attachment to the studs were only nailed into the base plate. So the walls of the home were not nailed into the foundation, anchored into the foundation in a way that would sustain that type of damage. While a high-end EF2 is determined for this point, there's not enough sufficient support to evidence to support a higher rating of EF3. Debris was thrown hundreds of yards to the east and the northeast from the home, including significant portions of the roof, clothing, and a metal pipe used in the AC unit. The northeast of the destroyed home, all the trees remained in the field, being cleared where they were snapped and uprooted, consistent with EF1 and low-end EF2 damage. It passed through Academic Parkway. There was an apartment complex there. We did have photos there, and that's where the damage was EF0. And then crossed over Interstate 75. Many cell phone videos, which I can show you one of those. We've got video right here of the home that was destroyed in the Laurel Creek neighborhood. The bottom of your screen, you see the video of the tornado crossing I-75. And that video, the passenger was taking the video, her husband was driving, and they stopped because they saw the tornado. So as it passed the highway, it moved across Highway 42, several uprooted trees near the industrial park there, and then weakened with only some minor damage noted around that industrial building. So it was only on the ground about 1.8 miles, and in 5 minutes demonstrated how quickly a tornado can develop and produce significant damage. And you're watching in that top right video, Reams, can you remember the name of the actor? I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. The show on HBO, Wires. The Wired. Trey, I believe is his name. Trey Shawnee. And his son, Malachi, I believe is what he said his son's name was tossed almost 300 feet from the home, from the second story. You know, when you look at that damage and the damage report, the small interior closet was left standing with clothes still on the hangers. And that resonates with you because when we tell you about where do you shelter from a tornado, of course, this thing spun up so quickly they had no time to take shelter. But when we talk about where do you take shelter from a tornado, a basement's the best place. But if you don't, you want to go to the lowest level of your house and an interior room and a small closet. There have been damage survey after damage survey after damage survey, even in EF3 tornadoes, where we see the exterior walls will fail, but that closet under the stairs or a small closet in the middle of the home is still left standing. And so this brings the importance of knowing where your tornado safe place is and being able to go there right away. So we are keeping that family in our thoughts, and our reporters have been on the ground today in Locust Grove, and they'll have a report of that damage survey that's come out, but also what's the latest and the outpouring of support for that 18-year-old that was tossed from the home. to my last knowledge, he was in Grady Hospital, still in critical condition. And of course, his father, who was also sustained some injuries from the storm, has been there trying to pick up the pieces today. So that just came in. We were going to talk about the storms that are moving through North Georgia right now, but that's breaking news. I mean, that was our big news story of yesterday, and really still a big news story of today, touching down very quickly and very quickly turning into a high-end EF2, 135 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. So that is that. Let me recap the live radar, which, by the way, some new information in. Okay, new information in Pike County. So we're tracking radar. We've been tracking these storms that haven't reached severe criteria in our area, but they've been strong. And a new report coming out from Pike County Emergency Manager Jimmy Totten says they have trees down on the south side of the county. I was actually zooming in and showing you where we had some of that lightning earlier in southern Pike County. It's just about out of there. I'm going to take the radar back. So it would have been from this cell right here that passed through Barnesville and then moved to the east. That's the cell that probably produced some of that tree damage. I'll take a look back at velocity just to check on things a little bit. I'm not seeing anything screaming at me there. Let's go and look at, I'm just going to take this over into Robbins Air Force Base. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything screaming at me in velocity, but that's something that we'll try to get more information about how many trees were down. So that's in Pike County, but otherwise we're almost done with these. So I told you they were intensifying in South Carolina and intensifying in Alabama. Well, look at this new giant severe thunderstorm warning along I-20 from the Augusta suburbs east to Columbia. That's a massive polygon. I mean, that must be an hour-and-a-half drive across. When you say probably an hour-and-a-half drive across from Augusta to Columbia, the western Augusta suburbs. So still some pockets of heavy rain. At this point, the severe thunderstorm watch was canceled for a lot of our northern counties. It's still in effect for these southern counties, but you know, these have a lower potential of becoming severe than what's moving into central Georgia. So there's still some pockets of heavy rainfall there in southern Morgan County, also northern Jasper County, moving in towards Monticello, and then out into Henry County and Fayette County. We still have some pockets of heavier rain that are moving in. Let me just show you the severe thunderstorm watch. So it was canceled for Atlanta, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Cobb, you know, this whole area. It's still in effect in these counties. I expect those to be canceled within the next hour as well. So we're almost done with that severe weather risk. At this point, I would say it's more primed for Macon's TV market than here in Atlanta. All right, that's going to do it for us here on Weather Impact 24/7. We are still tracking these storms, and we've got an update on TV coming up in about 10 minutes. And then at the top of the hour, team coverage, not just tracking today's storms, but that EF2 tornado that touched down in Henry County yesterday, which we now know has winds of 135 miles per hour, and it was on the ground for less than 2 miles, really quickly producing strong tornado damage. We'll see then.